Is dairy helping or harming your fibroids? When studies show conflicting information, what the heck do you do? Okay, so let's talk about it, shall we? Because, my goodness, if you've been down the rabbit hole like I have so many times with this very subject, you'll know that there's so much conflicting advice about there, out there. Right, so 1 minute dairy is seen as the devil, it's a no no, and the next minute it's being praised as some kind of miracle womb healing superfood, right? So, and honestly, I mean, let's face it, it's blooming confusing. So, here's the real question about dairy: is it helping or is it hurting you? So, let's get into it, shall we? So, if you've been reading and researching and trying to get it all right, you've been doing everything right. So, you might be wondering, why do the studies say one thing, but my body feels something totally different? Or maybe you're like a lot of women I speak to, you've cut it out completely, as I have, right? But now you're not sure if you actually needed to do that. Right, so here's what I wanted to say to you. Science is helpful. It really is. But your body is a lot more wiser, right? She knows what's up. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through both sides of the dairy debate, right? And what the research says for and against it. And then we're going to bring it back home to the one expert who knows better than anyone else, your own body, right? So I'll be sharing what I've learned from the studies and what I've read and from the women I've worked with, from the women I've spoken to over the many years, and of course my own experience, right? So stay with me. And because by the end of this video, my hope is that you'll feel less confused and way more connected with your own truth. Yeah. So let's get into it. So, what science says, now we're looking at the for and against. Right. So, let's break down what the science actually says. Right. Because there are studies on both sides of this dairy debate or the fibroids dairy debate, right? And I know it can be tempting just to pick the one that confirms what you already believe. But let's be fair and curious. So let's get curious about this. So let's start with what the science says first and foremost in favor of dairy. Yeah. So one of the well-known studies we have is from the Black Women's Health Study, and that was carried out with over 22,000 women, right? So they found on this study that women who consumed more dairy, especially if it was low-fat dairy, had a lower risk of developing fibroids. Now that's pretty interesting, right? But I also want to throw in the question who funded the study, but then that's another matter. That's a different subject for another day, yes? And this research showed that calcium, magnesium, and maybe even certain milk proteins could have a protective effect on the uterus. Right, and so there's also talk about vitamin D as well, which we know plays a vital role in hormone regulation. So, and that's often added to dairies, like when it's fortified. So from that angle, it may look as though dairy can be really helpful. So, but then we've got the studies that raise eyebrows in the other direction. So, for example, there's research that says that full fat dairy, especially if it's from conventionally raised animals, increased hormonal activity, right? And obviously that's due to the natural and synthetic hormones that's sometimes present in milk, and it's going to be present in milk, you know. And also some studies suggest that those hormones can disrupt our own estrogen levels, you know. So there's also concern around what you call IGF-1, which is the insulin-like growth factor. Though this is a hormone that's found in milk, and this may promote growth, the growth of hormone sensitive tissues. Right, so now I want to be very, very clear here. So those studies don't actually say that dairy causes fibroids. They don't actually say that, but they do suggest that there may be a hormonal interaction that's worth watching. So it's a case of observing what dairy actually does in your body. Yeah. And just to keep things balanced, there's also a handful of studies that says the link between dairy and fibroids is actually inconclusive, right? So as in they looked at it, but they couldn't find anything consistent, right? So while some women in the study had more fibroids with dairy, others didn't, which honestly kind of proves my next point, right? So science can be really helpful. It really can be, but it's also not definitive, because science is based on averages. Yeah, we're looking at the law of averages. You're looking at trends, you're looking at patterns, you're looking at the populations, but you you're not a statistic. Yeah, you're a whole dynamic living breathing womb man, right? So while studies can show us the possibility, they can't always tell us the truth for every single woman on the planet. Yeah. So here's what we're gonna do. We've just looked at the research, and now we're going to shift gears a little bit and talk about something else that's just as valuable, and that's how your body actually responds to dairy. And that's where the real answers live. Yeah. And I'll walk you through that and how to tune in and start noticing what your body's already been trying to tell you. um, just sort of like getting off for a little bit. When I mean, this has only happened recently. I asked my mum how long I was breastfed for, because I just assumed I was breastfed. And she said, no, you weren't breastfed. You went straight onto milk. And it was like, what? I was never that actually, I found that very hurtful. And I thought they managed to persuade my mum that another animal's milk was better for her baby, as in me, than her own milk. And because of she's of that era where, they listen to everything, doctors tell them, she just went with it. And I thought that explains all my health issues for all those years, all the eczema and the breakouts, oh dear, and all the gunk that I had to deal with in the past year or years. I thought it makes so much sense why I was so sick, you know. And but let's get back to let's looking at the science and this dairy debate, shall we? Um, okay, so we've got to look at the limitations of science. So now that we've peeked at what the research says, let's talk about something that rarely gets mentioned when we're quoting studies on social media or in articles, and that's the limitations of science. Yeah, especially when it comes to women's health. So here's the thing, yeah. Science, I've said this in the beginning, science is incredibly valuable, right? I read studies all the time. I respect studies. I respect the process that they actually go to come to the conclusions that they actually make. but it's not without its flaws, right? Because most research is based on, gathering large populations, often designed to find patterns or trends in a whole sea of data. So they're just looking for one consistent thing in everybody, right? That can be useful, but what it doesn't do is account for you as an individual, right? It doesn't account for your unique genetics, your gut health, your ancestral background, stress levels, your emotional relationship with food. It doesn't see the woman who's struggling work, trying to balance work with family, fibroids, and then just trying to get through the day, right? So, for example, maybe your grandmother thrived on raw goat's milk, yeah? But if you translate that to today and look at your gut microbiome, right, it's probably had antibiotics, right? Probably sometimes you might eat processed food because you've got no time to cook, yeah? Maybe you've had birth control, yeah? Maybe you've suffered with years of hormonal imbalances, yeah? Your body might not be able to process dairy the same way at all, let alone get a good quality raw goat's milk, right? And science won't always zoom into that. They won't zoom into that fact. They won't zoom that far. They won't look at all the nuances, right, when it comes to each individual person within their studies, right? Plus, come on, let's be honest, women's bodies haven't exactly been the focus of health research for most modern science studies, have they? If you look at it, they just have not been. No, 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 no. Right? Especially when it comes to the womb. Yeah. So for decades, women were understudied, underfunded, and even dismissed. Yeah. So a lot of the data we have still carries a lot of that baggage. And here's something I say quite often. Your body is not a lab rat, because a lot of studies are done on rats, on mice. You are not one of those, as far as I'm aware. Mm-mm. No, it's not meant to be standardized. Your body is not meant to be standardized, right? We are not statistics on a page. We are living, breathing, emotionally rich beings, right? And that means one woman's medicine might be another woman's migraine, bloating, hormonal imbalance, digestive upset. Yeah. So when studies say dairy might be useful, what they really mean is for some women under certain conditions in a specific form, it may help, right? And when other studies say dairy might contribute to hormone dysregulation, hormonal disruption, what they're actually saying is for others, in certain situations, it might aggravate things. But what situations those are, they're not going to say. And that's why we have to learn to trust our own internal compass, our own body, right? Because science can certainly open the door, but it's your body that has to walk through it. And only she knows, your body knows, if it's the right path for her, right? All right. So now we've looked at what the science says, we've analysed it, pulled it apart a little bit, and we've acknowledged its limitations, right? So let's now shift into what I believe is the most important part of this entire conversation, and that is listening to your own body. So, hold on, I'll finish my tea. Anyway, so I know that that phrase gets thrown around a lot. It really does, listen to your body. It's like, oh, what does that actually mean? Um, especially when it comes to certain foods, especially something like dairy. So let's have a closer look at that, shall we? So listening to your body doesn't mean over analyzing everything you eat or turning food into a science project. No, it just means starting to notice what happens when you eat certain things. And like you're really noticing this, like I've got really good at that and know exactly what's going to happen when I eat certain foods. I know exactly what's going to happen, whether it's going to happen the next day, on the same day, the next day, or a few days later. I just know I'm going to suffer at some point, which is why I will not touch that food, right? So you want to start noticing how certain foods react in your body, how it plays out. And you do this, you just notice it, just observe what's happening, and just paying attention to that. And so here's a really quick and easy way to start. So if you're still eating dairy, or if you want to test it out, choose a few days where you're going to eat it intentionally. So maybe grab some cheese, or put a splash of milk in your tea, or eat a yogurt, whether that's cow's milk yogurt or goat's milk yogurt. Because I used to love, there was a store that I used to buy goat's milk, and it had honey in it. I used to absolutely love that. It was really nice. And I used to put ground in flax seeds, and I realised I was always getting phlegmy. So I had to stop that. So that, and I noticed that over a period of time. So I knew it was that once I stopped, and normally I would stop and then I would go back to it just to confirm, right? So that's something you can do. You don't have to make this fancy at all, right? And then just observe, as I've said. How do you feel 20 minutes later? How do you feel an hour later, a day later, maybe a few days later? Just notice it, right? Just also note down the kind of symptoms you're getting. So, is it bloating? Is it stomach cramping? I know some of my family, they eat dairy and it's like, oh, they're doubled over with stomach cramps, right? Does your skin flare up? Do you get mucus, which is what one of my things? Do you get congested is another thing as well, or even brain fog? Do you feel fine, or do you feel nourished, or maybe you feel even better on dairy? It's just that you're observing what happens, right? I would suggest jotting it down. Just you can keep it in your mind or jot it down. If you're doing this for the first time, it may be easier just to jot things down. You could do it in an app on your phone or just write it in a journal if you prefer actual journals. Keep it light, don't over analyze it. Don't give it any rules. You don't want any food rules because that's just plain boring and too tiresome. Um, Again, you're just being curious, yeah? You're collecting data and you're going to be quickly analyzing that data, yeah? So you don't need textbook answers for this. You definitely don't. You know, there are women who thrive on small amounts of dairy, especially if they're from trusted sources, and there's others like me whose bodies just says, no, thank you, no matter how clean it is. It doesn't matter whether it's from you know, a, a cow that's free range and grass fed and its environment is pristine. It doesn't matter. It's still dairy and it doesn't agree with me. So again, you're just doing what's right for you. Okay. Um, and also, what you could do is try taking dairy out for a short time, like 10 to 14 days, then reintroduce it slowly and see what changes, right? So this is called a self-led elimination experiment, right? And it can be such an eye-opener. So, and you're not doing this to punish yourself or anything like that. You're just getting to know your body a little better, because this isn't exactly about following any rules or any dietary trends or, anything like that. It's about building trust with your own body, right? And the more often you listen to your body, the more clearly she'll speak to you. And that's how you stop the confusion. So you could stop looking at, putting your blinkers on, going, I'm only looking at this study. No, you go in and you listen to your body, because that's the most important thing. And the more you listen, again, the more clearly you'll hear her when she likes something or where she doesn't. So you're not trying to memorize all the studies. This will stop all that confusion going on. Do I do this or do I not? Listen to your body. I mean, did I say that already? Right. And you're literally coming home to yourself by doing this. So, you know, women have authority over their own bodies. Yeah. You have probably another overused word, which is sovereignty over your own body, because you really do, right? And you do have a choice. You've got other plant-based sources of where to get your calcium and stuff like that from, like green leafy vegetables, nuts, and seeds, especially sesame seeds. They're really, really good when it comes to calcium, a quality source of calcium. There are other foods, but that's just one, for example. But the thing is, when it comes to healing, it really is personal. It is not standardized. Right, so let's quickly recap before we close this out, right? So we started with the big question, is dairy hurting or helping fibroids? And we looked at what the science says. Some studies says not dairy, may be protective, while others suggest it may disrupt hormones, and many admit that the link is not clear, right? Then we looked at the bigger truth of everything, that science always doesn't have the full picture, and because you're not a statistic, right? Your body is your body. It has a history, it has a rhythm, it has wisdom, and it knows what works for it and what it doesn't. It's the case of us tuning into that, because I think we've lost that art and we need to bring that back. And finally, we brought it to the place that really matters, which is what I've just mentioned, and that's your own experience. This is what matters the most. Um, it's a case of noticing how dairy makes you feel, right? And that's what you journal. You just notice any changes, anything, no matter how small it is, when you eat dairy. It's just a short experiment to see what changes, if there's any. So here's the part I want to leave you with, right? You have total autonomy over your own body, right? You get to decide what healing looks like for you. Not some article, not some study, not some, data on a page or whatever. And if dairy makes you feel nourished and strong, perfect, beautiful, keep eating it. Yeah. Good quality dairy, that's what you want. But if it makes you feeling inflamed or bloated, or it causes your guts to seize up and you end up with the runs or something like that, also beautiful, just just let it go, say goodbye to it. This is what I had to do. It took a while though, because I loved my cheese, and it took a while for me to say goodbye to my cheese, but I had to say goodbye to my cheese. So either way, you're not failing, yeah? So there are many ways to support your body, um, like calcium-rich plant foods, almonds, again, almonds, sesames, green leafy plants, and there's always another way. But the most important thing is that you feel really good in making those choices. You feel, yes, I've got responsibility for this now. I can take back my responsibility. It's about tuning into your body, not just tuning into the noise, because there's loads of noise out there. And the more you do that, the more clarity you will have, yeah, no matter what anybody else is saying. So I'd really love to hear from you. Yeah. Has this video helped clear up some of the confusion around dairy and fibroids? Right. Are you currently eating dairy, or have you chosen to avoid it? Let me know in the comments below, because I want to hear from you. Your story matters, and it might really help somebody who's watching this. So if this video has been helpful to you, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend who might need this clarity too.